Welcome back, Broncos country. New platform, same show. Let's talk Broncos. Zach Seegers, Bree Maestas. It looks like Joey Richards is in the chat. He's slacking today. Ty Walden also first into the chat tonight. Ty, happy to see you. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you making the venture over to the Let's Talk Broncos YouTube. We'll get the show started with some absolutely terrible news today. Obviously, finding out that KJ Hamler would be out, put on the non-football injury list, and then was released by the team. He has to undergo some treatment for some heart inflammation that he was diagnosed with. So as we get further news on that, we'll be able to update you. Doesn't mean that he's unable to join the team at a later time. It just means right now that he's unable to perform football duties, and the Broncos have waived him. Whether or not he comes back during the season remains to be seen. We'll get into that in just a moment, but I wanted to open the show with the excruciating injury that Tim Patrick suffered today out at training camp. It was the first full day of pads for the Denver Broncos, and Tim Patrick went down with what was eventually confirmed as a left Achilles injury to his lower leg. After coming back from an ACL injury on the other leg last season, the last thing anybody wanted, especially Tim Patrick, was an additional injury. This obviously spells a very hard road for him to come back from, not only to the Broncos, but to the NFL in general. I was there for the first Tim Patrick injury, and I was there today, and I can still hear his yells. So it's a little bit sensitive. We want to remain sensitive to this injury, as it's terrible news for Broncos country, but it's terrible news for Tim Patrick, the person. And Zach, what can you tell me? What did you see when he went down? I think I kind of saw him just collapse, and then I heard it more than anything. Devastating news. Zach, what was your initial response?
Yeah, just shock, horror. The moment you realize it's Tim Pat, I think to your point, the scream cut through training camp. Everything froze all of a sudden when you heard that scream, blood curdling. Everyone turned and looked. You see a Bronco down, it takes you a while to recognize who. Whenever you see a Bronco down, it's sad like that. It's never good. And then you realize it's Tim Patrick, and immediately you feel even worse because you could tell immediately it was something with the lower body and non-contact. And you combine those two things, and a guy's not getting up. It's rarely good. Got the card out there, got him off the field, and yeah, I'm gutted for Tim Patrick. We'll get into the KJ stuff later, but I don't know what this means for him. The Achilles thing, he's done for the season. It's a fully torn Achilles. The two most devastating lower body injuries these skill guys can suffer are an ACL and an Achilles. And now he's got one in each leg, back-to-back seasons. I'm rooting really hard for him, but as a Tim Patrick fan, today sucks. It's sad. I worry about his career. I'm so happy he got his big contract before this happens. I think you could be a cynical fan and be, not to, take shots at anyone, but I think you could be a cynical fan and be frustrated that the Broncos didn't get return on their cap investment. But that's not the way I think you should look at this. I don't know. That's a human. I'm glad he got his money because NFL careers are short. Tim Patrick's, unfortunately, might be especially short. And I'm glad he's got some money for him and his family for the future. And I really hope we get to see Tim Patrick in orange and blue again and on an NFL field again. Those are fingers crossed.
I wanted to comment on your statement that the energy or the air was sort of sucked out of training camp today. Happened about an hour in. There was about 40 minutes left, and it was silent for a good 20 to 25 minutes after it happened. I think not only by shock, there was a little bit of rumbling from the media tent, but it was very, very silent from fans as the offense tried to get right back into it. And with momentum crushing instances in events like that, it's almost impossible to get back on track. I just wanted to comment on really the surrealness of it happening, because there's not a whole lot that you can plan for in ways of an injury like this, and then happening live out at camp. With a lot of excitement coming into today, and it's just heartbreaking. And Zach, you said it. You had high hopes for Tim Patrick going into this season, and I think that it doesn't deserve to happen to anybody, regardless of their standing of human being. But Tim Patrick is such a warm and incredible person that it really hits home. And I've been pretty upset most of the day, kind of just feeling terrible for him. And I hope that he's able to rest up and heal up, not only physically, but mentally as well, because we know that that can oftentimes plague a player. As I couldn't imagine in back-to-back years. I don't remember that ever happening, specifically to a player of this caliber. So thoughts are out to Tim Patrick, and I'm sorry to open the show with such devastating news. Really appreciate everyone tuning in. There's a lot of comments coming through. Mile High Prophet said Tim Patrick was quietly one of the best players on the Broncos roster. So damn sad. Prophet, thank you for your comment. And yeah, absolutely. Not only on the roster, but within the locker room. And so thoughts and whatnot to Tim Patrick and the rest of the team as they go to work through this. And then in devastating news, KJ Hamler also being diagnosed with pericarditis. So obviously already, and I'm so sorry, I'm a little choked up right now, being diagnosed with an inflammation issue around the heart. He's going to have to be on the mend for some time, coming off of a pec injury that was going to limit him, then being placed on the NFI, which I thought was a procedural move. Looks like it was, but it was given a medical event. Zach, do you think this spells kind of the end of KJ's career here with Denver?
It might. He was on the roster bubble heading into camp. Kendall Hinton and Lil Jordan Humphrey and Brandon Johnson, maybe even Jalen Virgil, I think are unfortunately making, maybe not unfortunately, but they are making waves in the wide receiver room. That's maybe unfortunate for KJ coming back. I know the Broncos said they plan to bring him back after waiving him. But if they really wanted him to be, like, if they just, KJ's a Bronco, no ifs, ands, or buts, you're not waiving the guy in the first place. You can keep him around on NFI and still have him on the roster. So, yeah, I'm really worried about Tim, of course, but I'm also worried about KJ. This guy just has not had any good injury luck, and we know through his comments how important this football dream is to him. Both these guys, I want to see them on an NFL field ASAP, preferably in orange and blue. But man, wherever they land, I'm going to be the biggest Tim Patrick and KJ Hamler supporter. They could go to the Raiders, they could go to the Chiefs, and I'm rooting for them to crack 1,000 yards. Great people, awful luck. I feel terrible.
I do. It begs the question, though. Although coming into training camp, I think the Denver Broncos were on track to have quite a crowded wide receiver room. With the injury to Tim Patrick, I think that it does note that there could be potential replacements on the market that the Broncos could be eyeing. Who potentially could you see? I think the list of free agents still out there could be a little bit thin. Do you see anybody that immediately impresses you or think that could fit into that role that is now very empty?
Yeah, I think they'll bring someone else in just to get a look. I think Jarvis Landry is a name to watch. He, was with the Saints last year, which obviously Sean Payton wasn't there. But the Saints offensive coordinator last year was I think Tom Chambers is his name. I don't know if I have that right. But was the long time offensive coordinator. Pete Carmichael. Goodness, I don't know where I got Tom Chambers from. Some other NFL figure. But Pete Carmichael was the longtime OC under Sean Payton. Obviously, they have a good relationship. He'd be familiar with Jarvis Landry and what he might have in the tank. Julio Jones is probably the best known name out there. Kenny Golladay, free agent bust with the Giants. The Giants couldn't get anything out of him, but I don't know, maybe that was such a weird free agency bust that maybe on a discount deal you can get something. He'd be a bigger body target. N'Keal Harry is an interesting one. He had a catch or two with the Bears. You are not finding a Tim Patrick replacement. So let's get that out of the way. Like all these guys, they're not replacing Tim Patrick. Yeah, they're not. If Tim Patrick's not making it on the open market till August. That doesn't, if healthy, those things don't happen. So you're not finding a viable replacement, but like, what are the best options out there? Unfortunately, N'Keal Harry's one of them. And he's one of the guys where you feel his best football might be ahead of him. Just about everyone else, you feel very confident their best football's behind them.
I wanted to highlight this comment real quick. Rock said, I haven't heard the name Jarvis Landry in 5 years. That could potentially be an issue. I also wanted to highlight Dow with, I would love to see us roll with our young guns. And that includes a long list of players who are working themselves back from either injury or uncertainty in 2022. We want to talk about Brandon Johnson. You already mentioned little Jordan Humphrey, who's had a pretty decent camp. You have Jalen Virgil. And so do you see any of the current members within the wide receiver room being able to take on bits and pieces of what you would have seen out of Tim Patrick? Because I absolutely agree. I don't think you were going to see a replacement for Tim Patrick. I think that the chemistry that he had built with Russell Wilson was going to be integral in Wilson's success moving into this season, specifically as we move past the preseason. So right now I'm in kind of a state of disbelief on what on paper looks like a lot of depth. Zach, you made a post on Twitter earlier today, and I replied a rebuke of sorts that on paper, it may potentially look like a better situation. Last season when Tim Patrick went down, I think Kendall Hinton was basically the step up here. Now you have Marvin Mims. Now you have Marquez Callaway. Now you have little Jordan Humphrey, and you have the ability to bring up players. Do you think that they would actually stick with what they have from what you've seen from training camp?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Bree. There's a very good chance they just stick with what they have. I see Frankie kind of throwing that out there. Indy also has a good point. They're going to be running the ball a ton this year. So is wide receiver all that important? Wide receiver 3, all that important? And it's definitely of diminished importance. We've seen, here's some training camp takeaways, everybody. Most of this is going to be Wednesday when we have a very exciting guest joining the show. This is mainly going to be the breaking news reaction episode today. But just because it ties in, we're seeing a lot of 12, 13, 21 personnel out there. So that's multiple running back looks, that's multiple tight ends, sometimes even 3 tight end looks. There's sometimes where there's only 1 wide receiver out there. Very often there's 2 wide receivers out there. It's not going to be as much 11 personnel as we saw last year or even in years prior to Hackett. Under Shermer, this is going to be a lot more heavy looks with Sutton and Judy out on the boundary. And so I do think they're a little better positioned to survive it in that regard. And then also you look at Marquez Callaway. Callaway's been really nice in camp so far. He's been good for Sean Payton in the past too. He's, I think, a very talented player. Has even stepped up in the past and been Sean Payton's number 1 wide receiver. I think he can help limit some of the loss or ease some of the pain from that loss. Marvin Mims, really we haven't seen much from him, but what we have seen has been positive. And clearly Sean Payton believes in him. This is about as much as it is the most Sean Payton has invested in a wide receiver draft pick since Brandon Cooks. I think there's something there. And then here's a little thing that's not in my live training camp thread, everybody. Brandon Johnson, running with the ones, running with Russell Wilson. You know who's not? Marvin Mims. You know who's not? Lil Jordan Humphrey. You know who is? Brandon Johnson.
Are you walking back you're going back to the hype train that you built last season?
I never walked back my Brandon Johnson hype train. Brandon Johnson was the truth, and if not for a devastating injury of his own, we would have seen it last year. Unfortunately, it just got a season delayed, and now you're going to have Payton cooking up the plays for him instead of Hackett. It is the Brandon Johnson assance. Get ready for it. It's going to be great. I think he has a great chance of making this roster. After just seeing what I've seen in the camp, the coaching staff has a high opinion of him. The last coaching staff had a high opinion of him. And then Kendall Hinton. I don't think I mentioned him yet, but Hinton is like the ultimate utility man, obviously because he played quarterback too. But I feel like in the past couple seasons, whenever they need someone to step up at wide receiver because they've been depleted by injuries, it's Kendall Hinton stepping up. So I'm glad he's still around.
Absent from your list that you just ran through, which includes a couple of names that should receive consideration, was Montrell Washington, who was doing well and has been having a pretty decent camp. We said that last year, and it didn't work out exactly how we had hoped. Do you think this year's different?
Man, I don't know. I I think it's different because you've got Sean Payton at the helm, and like this is a horrible situation to be thrown into. But like thinking on your feet, making these adjustments, guiding the ship through the storm, I think those are areas where the coaching staff comes into play, and there is a dramatic gap in coaching staff. We'll talk about the comments here in a second, and yeah, maybe those were a little ridiculous or whatever, but massive gap in coaching staff. I think you lean on your coaches to guide you through a situation like this, and Sean Payton's been there, done that. Oh, and Montrell, crazy, yeah. Montrell's not he's looked great in training camp. He's the training camp king, Hall of Fame. Man, if I was building a training camp squad, he would be one of my very first picks. I don't want to get burned again. I bought in last year. I was like, hey, I didn't like this draft pick, but it's so good in training camp. Maybe I'm a fool. And then we saw him play real games, and the drop off was so steep. I need to see it in real football games before I put any stock in it.
I'm still a member of special teams was kind of in the same sort of chaos the rest of the team was. And so I'm going to hold out hope that he's able to redeem himself. I don't think special teams was something that performed at least decently. And I think that can run across the entire board. I know that I bring up a lot that the blocking was an issue for Montrell Washington. Pardon me, I just inhaled air. But the idea that he can't grow into the NFL speed, I just think you could potentially see more out of him. And I'm going to keep my chips where they're at on Montrell Washington. Hope that he shows promise there, but I do see him spending a majority of the time on special teams just because they did sign Marvin Mims. It'll be interesting to see what this week in camp rolls out. Obviously, tomorrow, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday are the dates for training camp this week. Make sure you send questions to Zach over on Twitter, or we should make it a Discord exclusive. If you want to submit questions for Zach, he'll be out at training camp both Tuesday and Wednesday so that he can pay special attention to a specific player that you have in mind. Was there any questions that you wanted to directly comment against?
Yeah, that'd be great. Oh man, Dookie Nacho, what a throwback name. Sorry, just saw the comment about that. Bandy, the rugby wide receiver they've added. Someone's asking about him. He hasn't stood out to me. They have him doing some punt return work. He's had a couple of gaffes on punt return. I think I'd put him ahead of who's 13? Taylor Grimes. Grimes had a nice block today, though. I'd probably put Bandy ahead of Taylor Grimes, but that's about it. If he's rugby, maybe he's got some international pathway program stuff, which could allow the Broncos to keep him, but I would be absolutely floored if Bandy made the roster. And then I thought Frankie just had a good point talking about the run blocking in this pass catching group is buns. And now you lose the best member of that unit in TP. That's what Frankie said. And I agree. The run blocking here isn't great. I think Sutton's okay. But it's probably the weakest part in Judy's game right now. Again, more motivation to see a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of 13 personnel. Manhurts is looking good out there. I know he's a blocking tight end. He can move. He had some run after the catch today that looked nice to me. Dulcich is showing improvement as a run blocker. You noted that today, Bree. He was doing a good job paving a way for the run game, which was a pleasant surprise for me.
Well, I think he
Yeah.
was responsible for that breakaway by Jaleel that was so well recepted
Yes.
by the rest of training camp. So I was specifically taking note of Dulcich's blocking capabilities because that's been such a mark on his ledger as he's only played a handful of games here for the Denver Broncos. But doubters will find a way to doubt.
And
Anything
then
else that you see?
yeah, last one, and then I think maybe the next topic. But kickers. Kickers and fullback. Burton looks good. I mean, he's locked in at fullback. Kickers. They haven't missed from what I've seen. The first day I was there, they didn't do a kicking competition. Today I left before the end of practice because I gotta watch out for the elderly, and Mario was getting too hot. So we left before like the kicking stuff.
You guys
If they
ditched
even did
me.
kicking stuff today, so we did. No even remorse for that. But they didn't miss on Tuesday, or what day was that? Saturday at all. They didn't miss once on Saturday, and they were drilling it. I mean, Maher looked legitimately good to me. He was kicking it at
Say
the
it again.
top.
Say it again.
Maher.
Yeah.
Maher.
No. I
Um,
wasn't making fun of the pronunciation. I just think there's a
oh,
lot of doubters on whether Maher can be a legitimate kicker here for the Denver Broncos, and he was booting the hell out of it.
He was. It was so good. It was going through at the top of the posts, right between the two, hitting the top of the tower. They had a coach. I'm sure they were telling the kickers to aim for this guy, because that's what it looked like they were doing. They had a coach up there waiting, and like Maher's first kick hit the guy like right in the center of the chest. Fry's first kick went up to that level, but went a bit to the right of the guy and kind of bounced around on that deck of the tower. Maher goes up again, further distance, boom, hits the guy right in the chest. Fry again kind of like lobbed it into the deck. Maher comes up, boom, right in the chest. Like it looked like Bree, did you ever see those fantasy football commercials from like 2007? Like Chris Cooley punches his hands through a wall and like catches a football. Mason Crosby kicks like the top of the Notre Dame cathedral or something, some cathedral, and like does like the bell ringing, like ding, 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 by like kicking a ball up there. They were all faked. Lawrence Maroney like jumps through a moving car, I think. They're unreal like feats of athleticism that were all faked. That's what this Maher thing reminded me of. It was just like pinpoint kicking, which was kind of cool. That's it.
Okay.
There's your kicker breakdown. That was plenty of kicking time.
That is too much kicking time. Let's move on to interesting comments from brand new Denver Bronco Frank Clark when asked about the rivalry against the Chiefs, his former team. He had some very true words. He basically said, how could it be a rivalry? It's 15-0. And to that, I think there's a very important discrepancy of what is a rivalry in football, because it's not just the teams that you play twice a season. The AFC West doesn't ultimately make you a rival. I think the Las Vegas Raiders would be a potential rivalry for the Denver Broncos because the streak isn't that large, but the hatred runs so deep. With the Chiefs, it's so one-sided. I don't think there's any competitive nature. I liked what Frank Clark had to say. He wasn't one to go up there, don the orange and blue, and just say whatever Broncos country wanted to hear, although I think the general consensus was he's right.
Yeah, that's my thing. If you want to get really technical about it, like, yeah, I think both fan bases hate each other still, even if it's not. Oh, by the way, look at what we got at training camp. This cool white flag with the white helmet. It's nice. Look at that. But I think I don't know. It's not a rivalry, for all intents and purposes. Like, I know the two fan bases hate each other. They play every year. If you want to get really technical about it, but it's a rivalry in the same way CU and CSU is. Like, yeah, okay, it's a rivalry, but like they haven't beaten, as a CU alum, I'm speaking here, they haven't beaten us since like 2009 or something like that. Like, I don't know. Yeah, okay, you guys are cute. Like, that's kind of my reaction to it. And I'm sure the Chiefs fans feel the same way about the Broncos. I would like that to not be the case, but they're not going to take you seriously until you start winning games. I was just listening to a national NFL podcast around the NFL, and they did an episode talking about the rivalries they're most looking forward to this NFL season. They picked 6 Chiefs rivalries, I think 5 or 6. It was like Chiefs Bengals, Chiefs Bills, I think Chiefs Eagles, Chiefs Patriots, Chiefs Chargers. You know what wasn't in there? Chiefs Broncos. Broncos didn't even get mentioned. And that's the national perception of things. So maybe technically a rivalry, but it's not a respectable one until the Broncos can start winning some games.
Dal said over on the YouTube chat, to push back a little bit on Clark's comments, the record hasn't been competitive, but the games have been painfully close. I want to say, with all due respect, yeah, games have been close. At the end of the day, if it's not tallied in the win column, I don't care. I'm sick of losing by one touchdown or one score games. I am not a fan of it. I think that at this point in the avalanche that the Broncos are caught up in, a win is the only thing that's going to remedy this. And I do agree. There's been close games against the Chiefs where you thought, is this the year? It happens. Russell Wilson is making diving touchdowns to try and finish off the game by himself, but they were also close with Drew Lock in 2021. So until the wins happen, it's not competitive. It's not close.
Yeah, I fully agree. They need to win a game. I know the games have been really close, but at the end of the day, you look back at that record, and right now it's one of the most one-sided streaks in a divisional rivalry in NFL history. The Broncos have to put an end to that before it's taken more seriously by the other side.
Yeah, that's true. And I think with that, we'll go ahead and move on. Although Dal followed up with, you're right, though, if we lose every game but beat the Chiefs twice, I'll be happy.
Facts. They need to beat them. They need to beat them so bad this year. If you don't beat him right now with Russell Wilson while he's still cheap, and when are you going to beat him? Are you going to beat him when he's making 56? Because right now he's making 20 something. When you have $30 million less to spend on his surrounding talent, that's when you're beating the Chiefs. And Mahomes' deal is even more of a bargain. I don't think that's when it's happening. I don't know. That's frustrating.
If you had to wager a bet this season, one, do you think it happens?
I do.
Okay. And do you think it's the first or the second game, given they're in such rapid succession?
Which one's the home one? I think I don't think you go into Arrowhead, but I think you could win at home.
Okay. Yeah, I like it. Sound off, Broncos country. Let us know. Do they win the first, the second, or none of them? We'll move on to some fiery comments over the weekend and a walk back of sorts. Plus, somebody, without naming names, offers a rebuttal because, of course, he did. Sean Payton told USA Today that the coaching, and let me qualify this by saying, I don't think he said anything wrong either. I think that in a coaching position, you have to have a matter of candor, in which he does. But I also think you have to be a little bit more filtered in these situations, which maybe he's learning. Sean Payton basically called last year's staff culpable for the terrible coaching that we saw in 2022, also noting that it wasn't all Russell Wilson's fault. I will save you from the full quote, as I'm sure you all have seen it. But Zach, how do you feel about the comments from Sean Payton? We'll talk about who responded and what they had to say. But in general, how do you feel about Sean Payton voicing his concerns in the way that he did?
Yeah, I don't know. I could see some issues with it, but I think it was needed. I think, and Cal in the Discord, everyone click on our link tree. The links are very findable on our social medias, and you can join the Discord. But Cal in our Discord, I think, was making good points about how it just seems entirely performative. And I think it was, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think this was tone setting for the locker room. I think that was the whole point of Sean Payton doing this. He's not an idiot. He goes to Jarrett Bell, who wrote that story. Look at the stories Jarrett Bell has published about Sean Payton. Sean Payton goes to Jarrett Bell when he wants to send a message out through the media. That's their relationship. What was the message here? Guys, we can harp on the players and Russell Wilson and say the problem was the coaching and this, and they're out of the building, and I'm here now, and I'm doing everything the opposite way. We're fixing things. Just try to instill some faith. I've been here, or I've been around. I've done this. I've never seen something as embarrassing as what happened here. This is the worst head coaching job in NFL history, and I'm going to come in here and fix it. Was it too harsh? Was it maybe immature in some ways? Does it break the coaching fraternity or whatever? Yeah, it does do those things. Do I think it harms the Broncos at all? No, I think if anything, it helps them. And what do I want the Broncos, or what do I want Sean Payton to do? Help the Broncos win. Like help, and some of that is setting the tone as a coach. This is a more effective way of doing it than I think whatever goofy shit Hackett was doing last year. And then Aaron Rodgers like I think Saleh and the Jets honestly responded pretty well until Aaron Rodgers came back in and had to be like, well, I just think he's very immature because he's setting himself up for a soft landing. He's not. He just said someone failing in this spot was the worst head coaching job of all time. What does that mean about Sean Payton if he fails? He just matched one of the worst head coaching jobs of all time. he can't fail now. That didn't make the landing any softer. It made it a lot harsher.
Not being quite too direct with keep my coach's name out of your mouth. Aaron Rodgers had to say something. Then he also today, this morning, I believe on Up and Adams with Kay Adams, said that he had more to say, but he wasn't going to do it. But he has more to say. The drama that is surrounding these two teams heading into the season, they play week 5. It'll be interesting to see if the NFL does anything of it, but it almost seems like the two infants of the NFL are having it out right now because it's not like a big focused on winning team is making these types of comments. And I think there's also where I draw a little bit of an issue. If you're dominating your division or you're dominating the game of football, then I think that you can talk all the trash that you want, but you wouldn't need to because you show the results on the field. And I think that's what the Denver Broncos need to do, take the high route here, because right now they're going up against the Jets in week 5. It's going to be an interesting game just from the storylines alone, but it feels a little inflated. It feels like a very performative creature, and Aaron Rodgers had something to say. A very hard-headed coach like Sean Payton had something to say, and now they're both like, well, we're sorry about it, because they had to ask for forgiveness later. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
It's going to be spicy. Once the game happens, I'm dying to see that post-game handshake. Whoever wins it, it's gonna be interesting. Two, I think, like lesser headlines here, because I think the big headline is the jabbing back and forth publicly in the media and all these comments. A few things going under the radar, I think, here that I do want to mention because it's been driving me crazy as we discuss this.
Mm-hmm.
One, made it super clear who wears the pants in the Sean Payton, George Payton relationship. Can you imagine George Payton going to the media and talking about what a disaster 2021 Sean Payton was? No, it wouldn't happen, because if he did, he would be smacked back into blind so fast, if not fired outright right then. Meanwhile, you have Sean Payton going to the media and saying, like, calling out the GM by name. I know he said president too. I think that was about Joe Ellis, not Damani Leach. I'm pretty confident in that. That was a direct shot, right between the eyes at George Payton. Man, that 2023 draft class better look good, or it's going to be trouble next offseason. The other point, part of this is him saying it's not all on Russell Wilson. And I think that's huge. Coaching and the surrounding things were a disaster. They enabled him, and that caused all that. Payton very easily could have been like, this was not Russell Wilson's fault. He didn't say that. This had nothing to do with Russell Wilson. He didn't say that. Like, he could have been stronger. He was careful enough with his language to say it wasn't all Russell Wilson. If I say my day wasn't all bad, it means there was some bad stuff that happened today. It wasn't all good. Some good stuff happened today. It's not all Russell Wilson's fault. It's somewhat Russell Wilson's fault. That's what that means. And I think people are too quick to grab onto the Hackett element of it and go, okay, we know it's Hackett now and Russ is going to be fine. Even in his own quote, Payton is admitting that it is both Hackett and Russ. And I think Hackett's maybe the bigger problem right now. And great, we've removed that one. Russ is part of it. And I think we're even seeing it play out some in camp. His camp performance so far has been unimpressive. Payton has his work cut out for him.
I don't know where to go from this, because a lot of what No, that's okay, because a lot of what we were talking about now, through week one and up until preseason, will be a lot of if then wins. So when the play starts to ramp up, we'll be able to comment more on how Russell Wilson is looking out at camp. We'll be able to comment on if the addition of Sean Payton outweighs the subtraction of Nathaniel Hackett, because those are two very different conversations. You could have moved on and put any coach into this position. How is Sean Payton going to affect the outcome of this season? Now, with the news of not only KJ Hamler, but Tim Patrick, with Russell Wilson kind of needing to not only shake the rust off, but get up to speed with the offense. He looks very lean, very mean. I think that spells quite the positive note for some things. But I also think that in order to really tell whether or not Russell Wilson has the uptake for an impressive 2023 is yet to be seen. I'm hoping Sean Payton plays Russell Wilson in the preseason. Do you think that's a go, or how do you feel about that?
Given Sean Payton's history, I think there's a very good chance we see Russell Wilson in the preseason. He is a guy, you have, I think, the two big schools of thought, just to oversimplify this, where you've got the Shanahan trees and then Sean McVay, all that, who are being very light in training camp. And then I think you have more old school guys, Belichick, Reed, Sean Payton, where their belief is kind of, you get ready for football by playing football. And I don't think Russell Wilson will be exempt from that. Because, again, part of these quotes, we're talking about enabling him, babying him, all these things were what he was taking the past group to task for, the past regime to task for. So I think it'd be weird if all of a sudden he starts being soft on Russ or babying Russ. I imagine we'll see Russ in at least one preseason game.
I think that that's fair. I think that the limited contact that was seen during most of training camp, if not all of it, from Nathaniel Hackett's coaching, I don't even know if you want to call it a philosophy, saw the Broncos go through a very walkthrough consideration for training camp and practices. And then in preseason, none of the starters played. It'll be interesting to see which direction it goes in. And I assume that. I assume the starters will play. I assume that they'll play half of the preseason games, so a game and a half. That's just right around the corner, Broncos country. So don't you worry there. Zach, you look confused. Is there something you'd like to add?
No, I'm trying to look it up. Dal asked an interesting question. He said, where did Pete Carroll fall between those two categories? And it's always just so hard to find preseason stats. I'm trying to find if Russell Wilson has any preseason stats right now. Preseason. Let's go. In Seattle, he played 4 games 2013, played 4 games 2014, for 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. So in 2020 and 2021, he wasn't playing in the preseason, but for the majority of his Seahawks career, he was seeing some preseason time.
All right, we shall see.
That
answers my question. Joey's not here for Joey's question of the day. So, Zach, I want to know, where can people find all your stuff?
Man, I've got some exciting stuff in the works, everybody. Go over to milehighsports.com if you want to read my last ever article for Mile High Sports. Time of transition for me, but mainly what I want to shout out is everyone in the chat. We've got 11 people watching this live right now. Before any more of you leave, thank you. Everyone in the chat commenting. This is one of the more active live chats we've ever had. I think it makes the show so much more fun, at least on our end. I hope it makes it more fun on your end too. And thank you for the support as Let's Talk Broncos launches this new independent endeavor. The people in the Discord that I see joining and just people we met at training camp and everything. Thank you so much. The support, we love this. It's a dream for us. Please support us. It means the world to me.
There is an awful lot of distaste in the chat for my Def Leppard shirt. I don't understand it and I don't want to hear it, but if you want to have the conversation, go on over to the Discord and yell at me over there. I know these guys are going to be over there making fun of me. Tell me why you don't like Def Leppard and then come with an argument, because I'm ready to fight. If you are not in the Discord, you need to change that. That'll be in the description link. That'll be over on our Twitter. I believe it's the pinned tweet. If it's not, we'll get it over there. But there's a link tree that has all of our socials linked. And as you know, we're on a different platform today. we're here on the Let's Talk Broncos YouTube. So go over to Linktree, click on that, join the Discord. I would absolutely love it. If you missed me over on Broncos Country tonight, last week, you can go and check out those episodes if you're ever so obliged. Had a really fun time with Nick Ferguson, and then you can follow me, Bree Maestas 303. This is not the last venture or exciting news for Let's Talk Broncos. We'll have more information for you shortly. Thanks for sticking with us, and it was a great show tonight, everybody. We'll see you on Wednesday. Goodbye.